doubtless, like myself, said Flaubert, you have the same terrifying and tedious depths. That epigraph begins my last book, called Poems. And for those of you who are not familiar with my work, I thought I'd read a few of the short poems from that book. Only 6, just to give you a sense of where I was. And then we'll get into where I have been in the last 4 years. Loitering Hill. The other day, near Loitering Hill, green by the grass in pranced review, I saw my past and pondered why it was to be my future too. Interaction of the flowers. Petunias raise their lovely heads. I'd rather like to know. Interaction of the flowers while weeding it's observed. But I and you, we bind ourselves, lashings to the ground, and often brood the weight of us. Annuals we're not. Then a short 4-line lyric, which is perhaps my favorite form. They come fast and they're gone and almost unchangeable. It's my version, a Caucasian version of a haiku form. It's untitled. There's a rotting in me grows, a bulbing canker of the soul. At my peril I'd unearth it. There's a rotting in me grows. A pilgrim soul. There is a time of unsweet regress. Who then believes in coincidence with sophistication beyond our years? Temptation rises to hate that womb and stay the time when I appeared to love the world in innocence. That bloated carnage scowls me mute, and what innocence dared not demand cast round my scanned and pilgrim soul. When I saw that I had written Pilgrim Soul, I got nervous. Those of you who know the Yeats line, on Growing Old, I think it is. But then I remembered that Mrs. Browning had used it 50 years before Yeats, so I think Eliot said that the good poet steals, the bad one imitates. Just 2 more from the old book to give you a sense of where I was. This one is a little heavy, but I'd like to do it tonight. It's called Sonnet in the War Meter, which is, of course, punning on the hexameter of the Greek usage. If I write a poem, is it not mine to keep? Do I really have to share it, intruded on? Unsharing, I'm an expert at living alone and dueling with slow silence in the thorough day. Euphony loved and book-cared, though empty delight. I'm not at all sure I'd want to be with me. I have many thoughts I no longer share, since he secreted them to a distant time. He carried off my secrets to a garish maze, no less unkind, not knowing he'd impaired. Exposed as Isaac, I stood upon a stage and laughter besieged. I began to live unshared. Do we all share such secrets when we failing care? Do I live alone and unsharing share? The last one from the old book is sort of a giving up, isn't it? One doesn't want to let go. It's called When I Walk Among the Flowers. And those of you who remember your Henry IV, the characters of Pistol and Shallow and Silence and Barloff will get the innuendos here. When I walk among the flowers, now I would like to anchor here and go ashore among the flowers. But pirate courage are pistols, and then conversation shallows, and pauses are but silences when I walk among the flowers. By way of program notes, just to orient all of us, there'll be 2 short breaks of about 10 minutes each. And each of the 3 sections will average about 20 minutes. Poetry is condensed enough so that I think it's good to take a breather. This reading of the finished manuscript is dedicated to a gentleman named Jan Stussy, for whom we are taping the reading. He's a West Coast painter and sometimes skydiver, as of this week, which may surprise you, Kimmy, but I got a phone call saying he was jumping. And he donated the 16 drawings that you see on the wall for the book. And I was out there in April in his home, and we had a rather extraordinary time fighting and going over which ones we would use in the order of it. So this reading is for Jan. The new book is titled The Furtive Wall, and that comes from the first poem in the manuscript that you'll hear in a moment. And it begins with a 2-line epigraph, which combines the early 20th century Russian philosopher Lev Shestov, who I think is a rather extraordinary writer, with the 5th century BC Sicilian Empedocles. And he who can weep can hope, for the blood around the heart is the thought of men. There is a wall, a furtive wall, bluely dark in among the hills. Come rest your thought, leave behind the wills, then go beyond, bring your human ills. I signal now a poising call, there beyond the furtive wall. Some of the poems relate to my feelings in this section of the book about contemporary art and modernism. Artists are always railing against the academy. It's a standard, almost boring tritism, but one needs to do it. And about 4 years ago, I went to a Modern Language Association meeting. The purpose was to hear Elizabeth Bishop read. Now, the MLA is no different than the Legal Association or the Medical Association or any other association, unfortunately. I went there with great imaginings of how different it would be. Everybody was looking for a job, as near as I could. And the Academy thoughts no different than they were in 19th century France or any other time that we could all mention. But I came away with this poem. Even now the russet winds blow over and over the lanky field. Long since the banking eaves heal and the tiny snows stray into and out the promenade of trees, while grass receives the whitened shame, acquiesced into the violet same. not long thereafter, and I will share some comments with you that I would not normally do in a formal reading or university environment. I had dinner with Robert Lowell. It turned out to be his last dinner after the reading that he gave, I guess, at the 92nd Street YMHA. And there was another poet there from Harvard whose name I shall leave out because he's the quiet thrush in this poem. Lowell is, of course, the nightingale, but it's all used metaphorically. And it's a further statement or extension of the previous poem. Red hand of the sun, high above the wood, winter slow into the windfall night. I have seen the possum quail talking to the nightingale. Winter slow into the windfall night. I have seen a quiet thrush leaping to the barren brush. Winter slow into the windfall night. Would there be a fluted bird howling beauty's darker word? Red hand of the sun, high above the wood, winter slow into the windfall night. I asked Robert Lowell that night how he could, sitting in a German restaurant on 86th Street in Yorkville, how he could justify having written in a poetry journal that the best poetry would be something similar to the prose of Chekhov or Flaubert. And to me, poetry is poetry and prose is prose. And it's not a very confusing issue. But it's become the issue of the avant-garde in the last, the last 60-odd years. And his answer didn't make any sense to me. And I said, if you forgive me for being audacious, I'd like to quote Lowell to Lowell, because he denied all of his earlier work. And I quoted some lines which, from Lord Weary's Castle, if I can remember it. It's, in latter August, where the hay came creaking to the barn, but where the wind was westerly and gnarled in November. And he looked at me and said, that isn't bad, is it? And I thought, I didn't know that he was to die less than a year later. And I thought that was one of the great conversation stoppers of all time. This one is a favorite of mine. It's untitled. The trees in gentle umbrage swayed, determined times no perch to loiter. The dancing fears were unallayed. The soul was weary of the slaughter. Dreams were real, the real were dreams, and all beside I might have seen. The heart won't mistress to the mind. My heart's not mistress to my mind. The way of it. And I should, I guess, say that the first drawing on the left of Jan's is for the dust jacket. The second one is the frontispiece. We both agreed that that was me, in a crouched figure. And the third one goes opposite the poem I'm going to read now, which is called The Way of It. With the futile snow of spring, in the still light of my heart, I sing to you. Not for the struttings of the barnyard bird, nor the clanging of his woe, scattering the piebald snow. Not for the wrappings of the grasping hen, nor the stressing of her region to a one-legged reason, as the pieing snow, coloring to the green, becomes obscene. Where is the way of it? Where is the way to the heart? The heart. I cannot find the clock of time. I cannot touch the hands of day. Your hands point the way of it. Point the way to the heart. The heart. The snow fails and the birds to the north, white in their flight with the sky in spring. But yet, in the still light of my heart, with the futile snow, to you I sing. When I have gathered in the night, who can time the clocking hours? Who can time where day begins? When I have gathered in the night, when I have stalked from space to space in all compartments of my heart, who can time the clocking hours? Who can tell the tolling time in all the rooms where I reside, and lie myself to sleep at night, and lie myself to sleep at night in all compartments of my heart? There are about 5 or 6 sections in the manuscript. That section is what I call my upcountry poems. And why we go with certain imagery, Marshall, or Mary D, or other people, or artists, I guess we all have our own answers. I don't know why. Suddenly we seem to have said what we have to say, and we go on to another image. The sea has always been very special to me. And this is a short 4-line lyric. When lost is in the night, and darkness glooms the day, the hours drag me by, the years would fly away. The sea brings in the night, and deep receiving me, again, again I turn to the anchoring sea. BLEAR to the night, on into obsoleting night, buoyed past jetties, past the shale, dark of the night. BLEAR, BLEAR to the heart, heel to the wind with no answering helm, striven past silence, past the shoals, time of the night. On, in obsoleting night. The next poem is called Sea Chanty, and it has a reference in it that may be obscure for those of you who are not sailors. It's called Caught in Irons. And that's a dangerous moment in sailing when no matter how strong the wind is and the current, and even if you're trying to come about, you're stuck. And when you become unstuck, it can happen awfully fast. You can snap a mast and so on. So it's used as a reference for other things, but it's a dangerous moment and one should be careful. Sea Chanty. Aleatory wind on the numinous sea. The wail of the Harkness is in the sail. Gust to a time when I was free. Aleatory wind on the numinous sea. The sail is luffing, no one to hail. Listing to starboard, though helm's a lee. Caught here in irons, 3 steps to bail. Yet the wail of the Harkness is in the sail. O aleatory wind of a numinous sea. The next poem is a sonnet. And once again, I guess I'm back to railing against some styles of thoughts of contemporary modern poetry in the academy. But it really deals with much more than that. It really deals with themes of Ortega-y-Gasset and Spengler and a lot of other people. The mediocrity of an ever-increasing mediocrity of our age. So this is a sonnet with a sea image. Primitive, in my perpetual dawn, I seek the sea edged by a sundry sky, and flail watered notions that tyrannize, and monstrous bankrupt the lovelier word. Give way of theories, they destroy the wise. Accede back through the eloquent heart, give in to the clouds in the awesome day, curl in the sea at the edge of the sky, while tedious license stifles the past, ignoring music that inures the heart, ignoring mere language, seamster of thought. Let the freer declaim, mediocre on the trolling sea, drained a denizen, primitive to my perpetual dawn. You who have startled the sound of the sea, you who are startled, startle like me, give to the time of the sea, and walk in the marsh of the sea. That starts to get a little obscure, and I thought of a comment of Pascal that says, do not accuse me of obscurity because I lay claim to it. I believe that I can state that the next and last poem before we break for a while is an extraordinary poem. In fact, it's a superb poem. I can say that because it's not mine. It was written by a 19-year-old Greek girl, probably during the 4th century BC. And it's a lament by the poet ERINNA for her dead girlhood friend BAUCIS. The ancients regarded ERINNA as second only to Sappho among women poets. And I should add that ERINNA died less than 1 year after writing this lament. The poem was lost for 2,000 years, and a few fragments, totaling 59 lines, I guess, of which 20 were complete, were discovered in 1928. This is the first poetical translation in a modern language that's ever been done. It was done in collaboration, as all the translations in this section were, with Marilyn B. Arthur, who had shown me the lament shortly after my mother died. And artists have a funny way of dealing with grief. They got to paint it, they got to write it, or else it doesn't get exercised. So it's particularly meaningful to me, and I would like to end this section with it. But please, let's not think of this as an antiquarian work. The best art to me is always modern in the true best sense of the word. That is, it's timeless. There's only a few things you need to know that may be obscure. Then forget about them and let ERINNA speak to you. All I did was translate it. Mormo is a female boogeyman in ancient Greece. Now the boogeyman are men, but in the earlier times they were all female. Hymen is, of course, the god of marriage. Aphrodite, of course, is the goddess of love, Venus in Latin. And tortoise, that I have to explain a little. The tortoise was the girl in the middle in a traditional children's ring game played by pubescent girls. This was already old when ERINNA wrote 2,500 years ago. We just don't know how far back in antiquity it goes. Scholars disagree as the meaning of it. But I thought I would type it out and just read it to you tonight, and you can decide for yourself. They would exchange the following lines. The girls would sit around in a ring, and the one who was it would sit in the middle. And the girls would say, tortoise, little tortoise, what are you doing in the middle? And she would say, tortoise. The tortoise would say, I'm winding my woe, and my lesion yawn. Yawn for my leisure. The girls would then say, your little one, how did he die? There's one more coming, we'll wait. Your little one, how did he die? And the tortoise would answer, from white horses he sprang into the sea. I call it ERINNA to BAUCIS. Deep into the wave you raced, leaping from white horses, whirling the night on running feet. But loudly I shouted, dearest, you're mine. Then you, the tortoise, skipping, ran to the rutted garth of the great court. These things I lament and sorrow, said BAUCIS. These are for me, O maiden, warm trails back through my heart. Joy once filled, smold as an ash. Young in rooms without a care, we held our miming dolls, girls in the pretense of young brides. And the toward dawn mother Allotted woe to tending woman, calling Baucis to salt the meat. Oh, what trembling when we were small, and fear was brought by Mormo, huge of ear upon her head, with 4 feet walking, always changing from face to other. But mounted in the bed of your husband, dearest Baucis, you forgot things heard from mother, while still the littler child. Fast Aphrodite set your forgetful heart. So I lament, neglecting though your obsequies. Unprofaned my feet may not leave, and my naked hairs not loosed abroad. No lighted eye may disgrace your corpse, and in this house, oh my Baucis, purpling shame grips me about. Wretched ERINNA, 19, I moan with a blush to grieve. Old woman voice the mortal bloom. One cries out the lamenting flame, Hymen, O Hymenaeus, while the night whirls unvoiced. Darkness is on my eyes. Thank you. Let's start with a voice from the 2nd century BC, speaking of ERINNA. Here's an epigram by Antipater Sidon, who lived in Phoenicia, on the 19-year-old girl. And remember, Antipater was as removed from ERINNA chronologically as we are from Alexander Pope or Louis XVI. Here's Antipater's epigram. ERINNA's words are few, no excess in her song. Her little epic chants the lotting of the muse. For her remembrance no music ceased to wave, or black in the bind of night's shadowy wing. Yet we, the countless fashioned throng of poets, lie rotting, stranger, battalioned in forgetfulness. The croaking jackdaws scattered in the springtime clouds are as nothing to the soft murmurs of the swan. I will share with you one additional comment on ERINNA. When I finished it, I make my living with a typesetting company. My father was a typesetter, and his brother, my mother's brother. And I got the idea to set in foundry type a limited edition of 300 of these on handmade paper and send them out to friends and scholars and poets and translators around the world. That second part was really an afterthought. And to my amazement, something happened which really changed things for me. I became inundated with responses from Guy Davenport, who is giving me a blurb for the new book. And, James Schuyler, who's our current Pulitzer Prize poet, who's giving me a blurb for the book. And Mary Renault in South Africa, and J.B. Cunningham, and just all over the world. So it really, my little 300 edition handmade paper worked out very nicely for me. So it was very rewarding. Okay, I'm just going to do one more translation because it runs on too long. I'd like to do this. This is the first time that I'll be reading it. This translation is of a poem by a gentleman named Archilochus, who lived in the 8th or 7th century BC. Chronologically, he's second to Homer. And this poem was discovered, or fragments of the poem were discovered, on a fourth-rate mummy in 1964 in Egypt. The dryness, well, they needed papier-mâché, and the kings got all the linen, and the poems went for the bums and the lower classes. So it was just discovered in 1964. The entire translation is in meter. And let me just say a word about Archilochus. He was a bum. He was a whore master. His name means first sergeant in Greek. He was a mercenary. And he made a deal. And we tend to think of poets as high and mighty types that go around with capes and that's sort of a 19th century sense. But Archilochus made a deal with a businessman, a man of commerce named Lycambus. And the deal was that he would get his second daughter, named Neobule, and in marriage. And he would get a big dowry and he wouldn't have to go off and fight anymore. It seems that when he came back from one of his wars in Thrace, I think it was, Lycambus welched. There's no other way to put it. And Archilochus was furious. So he wrote what is probably the oldest revenge poem and perhaps the oldest revenge art. You realize that the Old Testament was written around the 8th century BC. You get an idea how old this was. It's as old before Sophocles as Shakespeare is before us. Maybe that gives you a sense of the change of language that would take place. We don't have the beginning of it. This fragment, these are all fragments. What we have is the point where a lady is speaking. I believe that it was the younger daughter. She's being coy and cute, who would be about 13. Neobule, who refers to as an old harridan, was probably 17. So she speaks first and says the kind of coy things that a 13-year-old girl would say. And then he answers, and you'll see in different parts, viciously, seductively, humorously, and then it ends with his describing her seduction. And I will say for you a 2nd century AD epigram to find out what happens to the daughters. But he wrote this poem and published it. And for the Lycambians, life was never the same. They were upper middle class. He was lower middle class. He was kind of from Brooklyn. And he was bitter when he was rejected. So this is the first time that I'm going to read it, and I call it Archilochus Seducing. And remember, the young girl speaks first, and then he answers. Archilochus Seducing. Contain yourself, I too endure. Calm yourself. Although if hurried, and the spirit goes, there is a waiting virgin here, gentle of the lovelier strain, soft with desire she'd marry now. Indeed her sorrows are for you, though faultless do I find her form. Then I countered things she'd said, O daughter of Amphimedon, now remembered noble and wise, there in the bind of darkening earth. The ample goddess brings delights apart from the divine affair. Of these young men may be sufficed. Let's counsel with the willing gods, and when all the shadows blacken, at our leisure take our pleasure, though as you order, I'll abide. I've known to wait with my desire, beneath the arch, beside the gate. Don't begrudge my course, dear friend. I'm for the garden bearing grass. Now Neobule's forgotten. She is, alas, just overripe. Another man may have her, fallen long since from the tree of her bloom, and the charm that she had before. Raving in lust of satiety, this harridan flaunts her vigor. To the crows with her, the neighbor's laugh won't be on a wife of mine. It is you I wish, neither dishonest nor other-sided, while she is quick with anger, and many are her friends. Urged toward eagerness, I fear lest the get, as from a throwing bitch, would drop blind, and on the wrong day. Saying so, I reached for the girl. Among a burst of flowers, gently she's prone. Then placing her neck to my pillowed arm, we hid within my tender cloak. Tremble-eyed as a fawn with fear, her breasts were encouraged. So sweet my hand caressed. Then I revealed my raw skin ever new, entertained with intruded vigor, and gaining the whole beauty of her body, let loose the white force of my strength, as lightly I touched her yellow hair. In the 1st century AD, a Roman consul named Lentulus Gaetulicus who was executed by the Emperor Gaius for reasons we don't know, wrote an epitaph on Archilochus. The writing of epigrams and epitaphs is what one did if one was a cultured gentleman. There is a reference here to a place called Helicon, which many of you may know, but that is the mountain where the poets were, where they received their inspiration from the muses, because the muses lived there. And it was a sweet and gentle place until Archilochus, who started writing revenge poetry. And in fact, Horace summed up all the poets since then with the phrase genus irritabili bacco, the breed of irritable poets and seers. They're really nasty bastards, all of them. So here is the epitaph by the Roman GAETULICUS. Here by the sea is the sign of his tomb, Archilochus, who bloodied Sibyl Helicon when he immersed the bitter muse, first with the viper's venom of his wrath. O wayfarer, pass softly by indeed, lest rouse the settled wasps of his lone sleep, flowing with tears. The keening like canvas has known the sting. 3 daughters hanged themselves. And it seems it is true that all 3 daughters did hang themselves. Then there are other translations which I'll skip due to time, and we go to a section called, without a title, but it's, I guess you could call it women poems. It seems to be essential that women have male poems and men have women poems. Although these days we're back to Catullus, where sometimes it works differently. And for me, these are women poems. It's called Midnight, and a lot of Jan Stussy's drawings relate to that, as you'll see. 3 or 4 of them appear in this section. And just to point out, well, I'll show you later which ones go with which. Midnight and a rambling sky. Lady, I cannot say I'm pleased with me as I par the gap of age and youth, and I wander in the wake of night, and I wonder where the wrong began. Lady, if we could now just have met, and time were back to younger time, but love defaults to a rambling sky, the stars lean down and quietly laugh. Early of an evening. In the early of the evening, while the world was marking time, she left without a reason, and yet with some alarm. Her thoughts were all of going, she wouldn't seem to stay. In the early of the evening, while the world was marking time. The next one is a sonnet called A Letter from the Virgin Isles. And the first 13 lines are in quotes, as a letter would be, and the last line is my satirical comment on myself. This is a sonnet. When you have resolved what it is you want, and can think of me in the tender time, then I'll come to you in the tender time, hold trembling hand to a trembling hand. But now you live in another's house, and walk with him in another's house, yet cling to me with a trembling hand, and surprise the fierceness of my heart. Give up this thought, leave me be. Love, I say, is a Catholic thing. Affairs are not by love construed as other than the world has known. Conduct your way, compose yourself. Woman, I say, don't come when time is terse. He keeps the woman while I hold the verse. Poets, are all liars. The only truth is in their work. Jonathan Swift said, in fact, of poets, that fiction is their trade, and I think it's true. Thomas Wyatt, who I'm sure you all know, was the first English sonneteer, Shakespeare admirer, wrote many wailing sonnets, but he also wrote the line at the end of a long affair that didn't work out, great love, if I remember it correctly. Ha ha ha, and I am free. Now I have my liberty. There's two sides of the cutting edge. The journeying girl. And this is another 4-line lyric, a form that I like so much. Go ramble in the lolling hills, yet stay with me this gruffing night. You neighbored love, oh journeying girl, in the fretted surface of the day. Dirge in flight. Things didn't work out at all well. Dirge in flight. Yet astride the peccant moon, sad sail pillowing to the sky, perceptive on the spread of night, too long we flutter in the bind. Imperious bird declaims the dawn, then deigns a step from out the sky. I remember, night of the moon may descend to a bird, whose perch preludes the frieze of vanity, pride's pejoration for the trenchant day. Aubade, called No Child of Morning. Most of you know, I'm sure, that Aubade was originally a French love song that was sung at daybreak. Normally it was one of happiness and warmth and love, but it also can be of the other kind. So I'm sort of venting my spleen, I guess. So here's an aubade called No Child of Morning. And some of these really require a setting. Let us say I'm sad for all the world. Or let's just say I'm sad for me and you. You cannot change the things you do. And I, no child of morning, though yet of yesterday, I cannot stay. Let us say I'm silent to the world. Or let's just say I'm silently unfurled, while whispering up a spiral and revealed. I cannot change the hum of you and me. It is easy as the hero, hard to live a life. Oh, let's just say I'm sad for all the world. I suppose, of course, nothing's new, though flowers are few in the heart of the world, except, of course, my love for her. And though, of course, we are but two, she's severed and strewn in the heart of the world. I would have been but one with her. In the wait of night, and wait here is as in waiting for a train, not the wait of the train. I, by a lake, face a scouring sky, and think of the time when love lay by, my love lay by, delightedly eating wine we were drinking, when I and my love faced the scouring sky, the scouring sky. Now I, on my back, with a book to delight, think of hours to come in the wait of night, the wait of night, listlessly dreaming and noteworthy seeming. I'll think of the time when love lay by, my love lay by. The next one is a prose paragraph, not poetry. In spite of all the nonsense that's written today and my conversation that I mentioned earlier with Cal Lowell about prose poetry, in about 1825, when Beethoven and Keats were still writing, Pushkin wrote a letter to his brother, in which he said, they're saying that in verse is not the thing. They say that the main thing is prose. And this heresy must be eradicated. I always like Pushkin's passion. So this is a prose paragraph in a book of poetry. A tale. Although he knew it to be insane, the truth was known. He stood bowed and observing. His hurts were his character, and that his destiny. Preceding himself with naivete, He had suited an arrogance of the unarmed and waited. She came, the wrong woman. He wanted her and they traveled, the moon being lit in the mouth of the sky. Imaging him, she was weakest of the strong and strongest of the weak. She was as the face of the moon, he the gleaming of the sun. No, she was the sun and he the other. Pallid alternation. Dibbicks danced on a frosted cake. Bouquets of laughter lined the aisle. As he was strewn about, memories crowded the jewel box of his soul. He prepared to place grief's mantle on. The truth was known, and he knew it to be insane. Just a few more poems in this section, and then we'll take another break. This is a ballad that was written for a singer who asked me to write it. And unfortunately, I did it before I heard any of her recordings, and then I withdrew it. But I think the word's a ballad, and that's always a problem of finding the right. It's very, very difficult. My dear friend Gunther, who's here tonight, who's my chess partner, had suggested that the ERINNA setting should really be done by Samuel Barber, because he's somebody alive who still knows what a melody is. And unfortunately, he agreed to do it tentatively, and then he got sick and left us. So this is a ballad called Kiss the Hills for Me Just Once. And I hope I don't offend any extreme liberationists that are here tonight. In the night of my heart, I cannot think in the dark time where you are or who you're with, but your heart's alone, I know, alone in the dark time. Kiss the hills for me just once, then sigh with the breeze just once. Relate to the trees as once we laughed at the seas, though now you grieve me. In the night of my heart, tears freeze from my cheek, the cheek that you touched in the dark time. I stand near the house and look to the wild, from the home you won't keep, from the home you won't keep. What do you want, searching for might? What do you want, alone with the night? Or what do you want, alone, I know, alone in the dark time? Kiss the hills for me just once, then sigh with the breeze just once. Relate to the trees as once we laughed at the seas, though now you grieve me. In the night of your heart, would you think in the dark time, oh no, won't intrude in your schemes, oh no. You're young with fame, it seems, an only woman now, searching for might. What do you want? Alone with the night, what do you want? Oh, what do you want? Alone, I know, alone in the dark time. Kiss the hills for me just once, then sigh with the breeze just once. Relate to the trees as once we laughed at the seas, though now you leave me. The next one I like very much because it refers to myself as an unwary oaf, and I always see that as rather fitting. And it's called The Song of the Unwary Oaf. And this one I would love someday to see set with a guitar, somewhat in the order of the English madrigal treatment. Little flower of twisted root, how dare you play a singing lute? Won't you know the day's not right to dance and sing in Mikhail's sight? Stubborn flower, why rise to grow? Struggling soil is teemed below. Oh, little flower, bend your head. Give in, enough to shed. the little flower, unwary oaf, stubborn, stiff-necked, foolish rope, laughed and played his singing lute. Twisted is a changeling word, how it's used is surely moot. I meant to explain, those of you who are not biblical scholars, Michal was the daughter of Saul, and when she first saw David singing and dancing in the street, I think King James Version says, she saw him singing and dancing in the street and she despised him in her heart. But I think women are liars the way poets are, and men are, by the way. But she ended up splitting out the window against her father Saul's objections and marrying him. So resistance is a funny thing. Okay, 2 more poems in this section, and then we'll take another break. This is called Blinking Buoy, and in a way it sums up my self-lying, or whatever you would call it. Clinically, I think they call it ambivalence. It's called Blinking Buoy. Let the staunchness of the night defend. I'll have no wives or other lives caught between 2 days that blend, searing the time when I offend the looming moon on the pinioned sky. I'll have no wives or other lives, but the coasted harbor gleamed aside as the gloating buoy blinks me by. Beat to quarters, hear creatives rant, I'll have no ties or other lives. Hear the cadence of commercial cant, culling jargon for the sycophant. The carrying sound of the heaving wave, I'll have no ties or other lives. Rushes on by, and I am still, save the disquiet of a quiet grave. And the coasted harbor gleams aside, and the carrying sound rushed on by. Gloats the blinking buoy as I fend. And the last poem in this section, and then we'll take another break, is another one of those 4-line lyrics. And, well, I'll just let it speak for itself. It's called Dawn in Latter August. Morning streams path tides of day. Closing flowers hide their sheen. Stretching women search policy. And sullen summer sleeps away. Thank you. It's an old story with poets that you often have to get the hook to get them off the stage. As Barbara pointed out to me, there's an old acting saying that not a dry eye on stage and not a wet one in the audience. So what I'm going to do, the next section is a whole long series of epigrams that vent my Archilochian spleen at all kinds of people that I'm angry at. And I'm going to skip most of it. I'll just read 1 or 2, particularly those that relate to some of the poems and that are human, some of the drawings, excuse me. I always see painting as poetry. And then we'll get on to the last section of the book, which is important to me and the more recent work. This section starts with an epigram of Sir Walter Raleigh, which simply says in 1 line, "No man can walk abroad save on his own shadow." And the first poem, epigram, is about a fellow named Attis. And you'll see this particular drawing here is Attis. And I'll just say, I'm going to go very quickly in this section. He comes from a Catullus poem, I think it's the 63rd if I'm not mistaken. And the line of Catullus is loosely translated, says at the end that there she, because the sex has changed, there she lived all the rest of her life as a family slave. Attis had things made. in Rome. He didn't know how good he had it. And he was bored with the gymnasium and his friends and so on. He was an upper middle class fellow. And he went off to the Phrygian shore to engage with his sailors in the rites of castration for the goddess Cybele. And after he had done it, and they'd all drank the wine or whatever it was, the special potion, he decided that he'd like to rethink the problem. As we all would. At such moments when he sobered up, and Cybele arrives with her lions leading a chariot and chases him into the jungles where he is forever a votary. And so I wrote this epigram on our friend Daedalus. Mad with the moon on the Phrygian shore, he danced as the night which spread. He wound in the night, and ecstasy fed, and ecstasy grew, and the tendrils bled. Though in his heart now dead, the dance had ceased, only night was spread. And a short one for Franz Kafka. Round my head through a broken door, weaving there while I begged for more. Round and round the listening night, crawling me with a biting blight. Roaches invade the waiting floor. No more, no more, Gregor. And then a short, sad one for our friend Van Gogh, who wrote a letter to his brother Theo saying, I am suspected of something. It is in the air. There is something behind me. This was written in the same letter. He begged Theo not to name the new baby Vincent. And when they did, he had himself committed. They left that out of Lust for Life. The problem was that he had a dead older brother named Vincent who died as a baby. And the mother used to take Vincent the painter when he was a child to the gravesite and say, there's the real Vincent. You'll never amount to anything. He would have been something the world would remember, but you. So this is called Vincent van Gogh. Madman Vincent, why dare to dare? An emetic battle couldn't be won. The other Vincent was always there, but not living Esau to be outcharmed. And I would say I agree with you. Another Vincent is cause for alarm. And just one more of these short ones. I've always been very suspicious about Daedalus and the myth of Icarus flying too high and all that stuff. So I started checking through my Plutarch and other sources, and sure enough, I got them. It seems that Daedalus falsely pretended that he didn't push his nephew Perdix off of a tower. And the court didn't buy that story, and they banished him for life from Athens. And he sailed for Crete with his 12-year-old, with his young son, Icarus, having pushed his nephew, Perdix, off the tower. Perdix was turned into a partridge by Minerva, who took pity on the 12-year-old boy. And the Latin word for partridge is, to this day, Perdix. Perdix was a great carpenter, and it really deals with the subject of envy of the father. It's just called Perdix. From Miss Priscian I would fly. I made the saw and compass, and yet I fear a height. Perdix, then Icarus. If not so very far, a partridge still may fly. I think I shall decide just how high is high. Then we rummage on through lots of epigrams, but I'd like to do a few comic ones. There hasn't been much humor here tonight, and then we'll get on to the last section of the book. This is for a fellow named Giovanni Angelo Medici. Those of you who don't know Giovanni, he was also called Pope Pius IV. Now, Pius IV had a problem with Michelangelo, or with his paintings, although he lived much later than Michelangelo. And he commissioned a painter named Daniel da Volterra to paint cloths over the genitalia of the painting The Last Judgment in the Sistine Chapel. Da Volterra became known by his fellow painters as Bagatone, which is the breeches maker. This is simply called Giovanni Angelo Medici. It was Pius IV who ordered a cloth and had breeches adorned so he wouldn't fawn, and no longer giggle at nudes by Michelangelo. And a short four-line one, I'll just do two of these and we'll move on, called the Poetaster. It has an epigraph over it from Alain Lesage, who I think is an extraordinary 18th century French writer. Simply says, referencing the 17th century group of poets in Madrid, he mauled them, every one without mercy. It was easy enough to see he was an author. It's called the Poetaster. Not without lessons, you're writing a verse, come loiter on my euphonious perch. $12 the hour, unmetered fee. Often the Village Voice has published me. And the next one is called Artist Dining in the Hamptons. And this particular drawing goes with that. Those of you who know the Hamptons, that's where the rich go to get richer and the would-be rich go to get whatever they consider riches. But it has become an extraordinary place. And this has an epigraph from our old friend Baudelaire, which says simply, the study of the beautiful is a duel in which the artist cries out with fear before he is vanquished. And this is a true story. Artist dining in the Hamptons, 4 lines. Then you're giving a dinner, not without me, to improve my art. I'll leave a husband home and improve cachet with a gallery drone. Then delight in my canvas that vanquished me. And the last one of the short ones, following through on Walter Raleigh's comment. And this is the drawing that Jan and I picked to go with it. In 4 lines. It's called Refrain, which is punning on the 2 meanings of refrain. When young, with opening desire, a closure they provide. Now I crouch rather low and do my best to hide. Okay, the last section of the book. This poem is called The Trout Duet. And I admit that I was fishing up in the Adirondacks, humming the trout quintet to myself, and I caught a small fish, and we had a conversation, and I've never gone fishing since then. The Trout Duet. Trout, don't look at me like that. You thought the fly was real. Don't look at me like that. Oh, easy as the ethical trout while wriggling on a line. Ideas of ordered nature were different swimming free. Some cooling water as we chat trout. Oh, trout. My problem's not with you, nor even with the fly. It truly runs to pleasure, liar that I am. Trout, don't condescend to scan my sybaritic soul. I'd rather sit this rock and think your murderous swims than cite that side to me. Trout, don't look at me like that. Be sanctimonious with a minnow. Trout. Then comes a series of 7 haiku. And it appears without any comment, but I would like to share just quickly, if I were to have epigraphs over it, just to give you some sense of it. A letter of Jefferson's comes to mind where he says, the greatest danger to our Constitution will be urbanization. Ortega y Gasset's Revolt of the Masses, Yeats's Second Coming. I'm sure you all remember those lines where I think they're very appropriate today. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The ceremony of innocence is drowned, and such lines as that. But in my last book, there's an epigraph of Giambattista Vico that I would just like to quickly read. Vico, you may remember, is the philosopher's philosopher. He wrote at the time of Descartes, and was the father of most of the social sciences. Freud adored him. Our anthropology, anthropomorphic thinking. He's one of the great philosophers. And in his autobiography, talking about what will come after, maybe this is 1720, after the revolution and after the period of romanticism and after democracy and after all the wonderful things, he did not see the world the way the young Beethoven and Eroica, or the way the young Keats writing, "Hear ye the hum of mighty workings in the distant mart." What he said in 1720 is, in the second barbarism, after the attempt at democracy, though they throng together, they will live like wild beasts in a deep solitude of spirit, and will scarcely any two of them be able to come to understanding, like base savages under false words and soft embraces. And here is 7 by night. The exaggerating moon lit the tree of night, slow in the silence. The febrile moon of night descends the sky, beguiled by proud flesh. The flouting moon comes to the bed of truth, stun the silence festive. Samba timbrel in the night, repel the song of an audacious moon. Cityward then, pliant night exceeds into the ganging of the day. Thronging to the day, city wealth accumulates, men decay. Exalting the day of the unmoon night, now anthropophobic man. Walk with me where the moon is flung an incising night. Walk with me and hold my hand. Sonnet. Let time, in disparagement of days, inure the soul that yearns to exceed through regions of loss and little praise, where jackdaws winging caw the sky and stult the cuttings of the blessed. The easy ones are blessed, they say, not caught between 2 days, they say, where nighttime grackles wander wide and strut with pleasures their behest, birching sentinels arch unaware, as enrageous claims define the field. Bold shrubs align this blurting sphere. O time, who loathes to lose oneself, how different is the discourse of today. Bleak of the heart and hearth, I recollect myself in the gnaw of January, a little movement so far on the crippling snow. And in conjunction with a day, slow dreams are dreamt in ripened time, though shadows bleak in reproach, when in conjunction with a day. And in conjunction with a day, as dear again as dear to me, how sad a thing is sadness now, when in conjunction with a day. In the next poem, the word loots is used, and that is as in looting a store, not as in playing a lute. In a fantasy of my wilder heart, as death in silence loots the night, yes, loots the night, edged to extremity while all's asleep, yes, all asleep, if the angry night would only weep, as squall clouds bloat the quickened sky, ruminations rain on the ruined dawn. Again I ask, and again ask why. Many of you know that I went to Ireland last fall and fell in love with the Dingle Peninsula in the southwest of Ireland, the county of Kerry. And that seems to have been the germination or gestation process for this poem, which I wrote when I came back. In a sea-dreamed cloister house, lived by the walls of the night, lived with the fear of a fear and the turfside clashings. In a sea-dreamed cloister house, lived of a time dismembered, lived with the old sea lashings and no one to answer. In a sea-dreamed cloister house, lived, though the night remembers, and unruffled flows the sky above the draggled beach. That's an optimistic poem. Sometimes with my work it's hard to tell. It's a 4-line lyric, which is the next to the last poem in the book. In the inchoate plan we do not define, stumbling past the placid rock, loathly reeling in aggressive shade, now the rising beauty of a terrible moon. And the last poem, which is in 4 stanzas, except for the afterword poem, is called Bird in Flight. Dear little bird, flown from the wildings of her hair as a gift of time that wends, glist with delight a gentler song. In the drift of time the way begins, and time unfolds, and time descends. Dear little bird, so zealous in refulgence, lilting streams and tumbling voids, drenching rocks, soon pleat the night. In the drift of time the way begins, and time unfolds, and time descends. Dear little bird, why disquieted though tempted? Why arrogated to dismay? With lamentation look and pass. In the drift of time the way begins, and time unfolds, and time descends. Dear little bird, free solitary, spirit alone, unbound probate, homeless on the earth, fly, oh fly, on wings of weakness, fly, frail Jeremiah, probate of time. Dear little bird, time unfolds and time descends. In the drift of time the way begins, and time unfolds and time descends. In the afterword poem, which is the end of the manuscript, there is a certain sycamore tree down by old Hillary Brook. Come wander to the sycamore tree, but bring the doubts I took. You'll find the way is easy, though